Hello and welcome to Downforce Debrief. At the time of recording, we are just off the back of a F1 break week, but we have just had the finale of F1 Sim Racing, also known as F1 Esports, and that's kind of what we're going to look at today. We have got a special guest joining myself and Alex on the podcast. Welcome, Mr. Brendon Leigh. How you doing, Brendon?
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, good stuff. So we're obviously going to look at your kind of journey from, I guess, the start of your esports, as it was called back then in 2017, your start of your career, up till the point of you announcing your retirement. So obviously very timely with the finish as well of Event 3 in Sweden just gone. So yeah, I guess do you want to kind of start us by talking through the beginnings for yourself in 2017?
I feel like we need to start like before that. Like obviously 2017 was your first esports season, yes. But like no one just jumped straight like as an esports driver, right? So like how did you get to that point? Like did you know, okay. When did you first start sim racing? When did you first start getting into F1? We want your whole life and times of Brendon Leigh. Come on, hit us with it.
Right. Lovely job, Lee. So basically I did motocross as a kid. That's what kickstarted my sort of passion. Of course, being a boy in my generation, I was born in 99, PlayStation, Xbox was pretty normal, you know. So of course playing motocross games, and that's what really fueled my competitive bug, you know. Then fast forward to 2008, 2007 time, I became a fan of Formula 1. 2010 they started to make the F1 game for the console. So every single game, every single year since 2010 I played the game, you know. So 2012 I actually started watching you, Alex. I still remember very vividly the race you did on Singapore against Exonage back in the day when it was the wet dry wet. And yeah, Alex was and Jerome were the people that got me fueled to do competitive. Started league racing unofficially at the back end of 2013, like the fun leagues were like 2 weeks to go before 2014 came out. F1 2014 launched. I started league racing then. I remember I was so nervous. I was like shaky leg on the pedal completely, and a complete disaster in the stewards. Actually, I was a disaster in my racing standards. I think I still have some of my highlights like unlisted on YouTube, and yeah, was bad.
Give us an example. How bad are we talking?
Like Monaco, I think I crashed like 3 times, but still finished like 5th. So I was okay on the base, but an absolute disaster in the steward's room.
When you say crash 3 times, you delete like 3 separate people, but you just survived.
Well, I got deleted as well. So, like, there's a good clip of me spinning. I think it was spinning in Casino Square because I sent it up the inside of another car and just got tangled and bye-bye. So then, yeah, was doing competitive league racing from 2014... 2015, doing AOR. Funny story, my internet was actually not good enough, so I was having to hotspot my phone data to my Xbox then to be able to league race.
That was better? How?
That was better. I had, back there where we lived, within the middle of nowhere, I think I had 0.3 upload and 2 download.
Oh my god.
And it was okay for other games, but the servers on F1 25 were not 2015, there we go, F1 2015 were not that good, to be honest, I think, looking back anyway, especially because the lobby host was in America. So it was just impossible for me to league race without using the mobile phone connection. 2016 came back, luckily the servers were more stable then, and then 2016, 2017, then got into F1 Esports.
So you were 14 when you first started proper league racing, is that right?
Maybe you're better at maths than I am, but roughly around there.
So interesting. And how did you do in your league racing? Were you just straight away like, I win everything? Or, I mean, obviously P5 in Monaco, that wasn't a win, but did you build up the kind of performance? Obviously getting to the point of being the fastest, certainly F1 Esports player in the world for the first couple of seasons of F1 Esports. So did you build up to that slowly, or were you always quick, or how did you evolve your pace, I guess?
I was decent on the pace. I was actually put on to tier 2 on my first league, XRL if I remember correctly. Was able to put it on the pole position on my first race, but just lacked a lot of consistency and race management skills. What, funny enough, actually became my best asset towards the end of my career. So yeah, it was quick, but just making too many mistakes, not really understanding how to be mentally in a race. And that's sort of what I built up with knowledge. And then 2017 was a real like sharp point for me that, to be honest, I was like, okay, we have one chance to make this work to win the championship. So I need to really work hard on just being calm. And for me, even now, it's easier for me to massively overdrive than it is for me to drive slightly under the limit. I'm always like pushing too hard in many ways.
Interesting. And so was the F1 game basically your whole life at that point? Or were you like, you know, obviously you clearly played a lot of it, but like, were you also playing, I don't know, Call of Duty and everything else? Or was it just like F1 game, F1 game, F1 game?
F1 game and Forza Motorsport. I did a league called Tora back in the day. And that was fantastic on Forza Motorsport 5, if I remember correctly, the time dates. And funny enough, it taught me so many skills, because although Forza Motorsport was not really a sim, and it still isn't, you have a bit more setup items than you did in the F1 game. So it taught me a lot about if the tyre is wider, you do this with the camber, if your tyre is thinner, you do this with the toe, etc. And taught me also to do endurance races. Because although you could only host a lobby for 2 hours on Forza back then, we were doing 24-hour races on Le Mans, and basically you'll do 2 hours, then your stint would end, they would make a new lobby, 2 hours, new lobby, 2 hours, new lobby.
Wow.
And what they would do, because Forza was calculated by the feet, not by a second, I think it's still like that anyway, basically they would take the feet at the end of the race, they'll get everyone with a collective slam on the brake. Everyone now totals up the feet at the end of it. They put that into a spreadsheet, start the next lobby, and that's how they would calculate who wins over 24 hour.
Wow, that is commitment.
So Brendon, so at this point then, going into 2017, the first season, how did you, I mean, Alex kind of touched on it then, but how did you know that you wanted to be in esports? Were you just simply winning every league race? Were you just decimating everyone in online races, and you were like, oh, clearly I'm pretty good at this?
So actually, I was losing a lot. Actually, there was a guy called Sully back in the day. I always mispronounce the second name, so apologies for it. Like Soluk, I really struggle with pronunciation, so apologies.
He's going to be really offended watching this.
I'm sure he would be.
Soltuk?
That's it. Yeah. Sully. And of course he had his brother as well. But so Sully was always decimating me, where I could keep up in a PB situation, but he was always having a much better brake capacity and managing the race. So I would maybe get 1 or 2 race wins here or there, but over a season he was beating me out.
Okay.
And then, so how did you get? So obviously, 2017 was esports season, right? But how did you get there? Because they don't just let anyone race in a whole esports season. So what was? I can't remember what the qualifying was like back then. Was it on F1 2016 you qualified, or was that season on F1 2016? I can't remember.
So first season was 2017. My apologies. So first season was 2017, and you qualified with 3 routes, if I remember correctly. Each console had a certain allocation. I can't remember the exact number. You did do an AOR league, and I think the top 5 or something like this from 3 races over Xbox, PC, and PlayStation would go. So I think it was 15 allocated for that. Then there was a lot of allocation for doing Event 1 and Event 2. What was like this time trial against AI situation. Our first one was with a Red Bull on Monaco. The second one, I think, was with a Racing Point on Monza. And that's how the allocations were split up. I think it became 40 people in the semi-final, and then the grand finale was, of course, 20.
God, that's crazy to think of that format now. When you think of how teams have their drivers now and the league racing pedigree and how competitive things are, it's crazy to think that it was like AI time trial leaderboard to decide some esports positions. That's crazy. So then what? You were just kind of like topping those times and having the best time in the world or something like that?
I think I got provisionally Monaco at the top. But I actually qualified by, if I remember correctly, winning the AOR one, or at least being close to the top in the AOR one. I remember winning China. I actually still have the YouTube highlights up on my YouTube channel. So that's always cool to go back and watch occasionally. So at least I qualified for the AOR one because it was way less stressful than doing time trial against AI. And that's what put me in the door basically for the semi-final.
And there was no teams back then, right? Really, were you completely on your own for that? Certainly qualifying period. I mean, during the season, did you have any team or coaches or whatever? You know, all the stuff you get these days. Was there any of that back then?
For the semi-final, no. Then the semi-final, I was contacted by a team called F1 Esports. And actually I did join them temporarily, but then I got a different offer to be joining an agency called Esports and Cars back then. What then signed me up, and basically after the semi-final provided me with the equipment, a PC, the Thrustmaster pedals as well, to then train for the grand finale. So there wasn't a coach, there wasn't really any setup knowledge. You just had a group of mates that you did practice with, and then you would go. But to be honest, I was a bit of a loner back then. So what I would do was I would basically trick people into open lobbies. So I would host the lobby open, because of course you can't start the race by one person, even back then. I would trick people saying it was like a 5-lap race on Canada, because that was Canada, Spa, and Abu Dhabi. And then they'll say, oh, we got a 5-lap race on Canada, let's join. Then at the last second, I would change it to like a short qualifying and 25% race. So then it would start the lobby and everyone else would leave, but I can do my practice laps.
Amazing. That's absolutely incredible. Interesting. Okay, so then you were basically on your own then. I mean, how much practice were you doing at this time? Like, obviously, you know, we know now in hindsight that you won very comfortably. You won that esports season, I think, in the end, according to the wiki here. 4 wins out of 5. Does that sound about right? I don't think that tells the whole story, but
that was 2018. 2017 was won on the final lap. For practice, I was really fortunate actually, because I was working and training as a chef before then, and I basically said to myself, and I had a commitment that if I got through the semi-final and got to the grand finale, I phoned my boss, I quit my job, and just put all my eggs in the basket for esports.
Wow.
So 2017 was literally win it or bin it, because then I had to go and answer to my mum why I was jobless. So yeah, it was a bit tough in that moment, because she didn't understand esports, and there was a lot of pressure. It was like, why are you quitting your job to just play a video game, you know? And then yeah, that was the kickstart. Then to go back to what I alluded to earlier, the 2017 finale, the top 3 in the championship was separated by 1 point into the final race. And after lap 1, we were P1, P2, and P3. So we spent the whole race following each other and was only able to win it on the final lap.
Was it a 3-race final?
Yeah.
Wow. No way. So 20 of you go into a 3-race final, 3 races,
Yep.
then you're an F1 Esports Champion after 3 races. That seems like
Yes.
nothing.
Wow.
And
That's mad.
I think, to be honest, in some way, that was probably quite entertaining for the viewer to have such a condensed weekend to crown a champion. I don't think it would work now with so much team involvement. But back then, it was probably, I think actually, no, definitely the best solution to have on the Abu Dhabi race weekend. 3 races, quick fire races, bang, 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 go win it.
And that was held in Abu Dhabi itself, right? So
Yeah.
I presume the esports paid for your tickets and stuff, like you didn't
Yes.
have to somehow fund your own flights. That'd be insane for where it was starting out. So had you been to like F1 races before? Had you been that far afield before? I mean, I know I was actually at the same race. It was Abu Dhabi 2017 we're talking about, and that was at that point my furthest long haul flight I'd ever done. I'd only ever done a few hours within Europe, really. So for me, that was the furthest I've ever been. But was it similar for you, or had you already kind of been lots of places? You'd already experienced this kind of thing, lots of races?
First time on a plane, first time out of the country. My passport only arrived 1 week before.
Oh my God.
So,
Wow.
again, once I got through the semi-final, I think the semi-final was on a Thursday, if I remember correctly, got home on the Friday and applied for my passport and quit my job. Yeah, it was a really intense period and a relief when it turned up.
And
What job were you
Brendon,
doing?
how...
Sorry.
Go on.
Go on. Do my question quickly, then we'll go to your judge. What job were you doing that you quit?
Training as a chef.
Okay. Have you done that since, or have you literally that's it? You've just done esports ever since.
That was it. So basically, what happened was for winning 2017, you got $2,000 prize money, $2,000 I think it was, and a ticket to go to any race that you wanted to. So basically, I took the 2K, leaked from it, and then got my contract with Mercedes in June of 2018, and then since then I've been full-time professional.
So you kind of just touched on what I was going to ask there. So how involved were Formula One themselves? Because I think it's quite a talking point to nowadays, with obviously how the events are hosted in Sweden and clearly a very different dynamic. But how was it back then? How keen were kind of teams, Formula One, etc.? How keen were people to get involved for the first ever championship? Because bearing in mind this is pre-COVID, right? This is before we had that big spike of online activity as well. What was it like?
They were really interested, I think. 2018, the only team that didn't sign up was Ferrari, because I think they didn't really understand esports at that time. Then, of course, in 2019, they put a big investment into the series. But yeah, the teams were really excited. The owners of Formula One were very excited. The race that I decided to go to was Canada. And I was just chilling in the paddock club, the thing above the pit stalls. And the boss recognized me, came up to me, talked to me, recognized what I did in the Esports Championship, and we had a nice chat, you know?
Oh, that's really cool.
Like, the fact is, it wasn't scripted. It wasn't, like, something that he was, like, oh, knowing that Brendon Leigh is there, or, like, something like that, or being told by his assistant. He walked up, saw me, had a chat, and was very enthusiastic. Same as 2019. 2020 was a bit difficult because of COVID to understand the feeling. But I would say that esports has always been really well welcomed in Formula One, and I think they have been pushing for it. But just to be completely transparent and being very honest, I think a lot of the community is a bit toxic, to be honest. And it's quite hard for a corporate brand to really get behind. If you look behind the scene and really be honest about it, back in 2018, 2019 days, they were pushing everyone on the social media. Now they have their own separate esports account, you know? So it's a bit of a hard thing to say.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I guess the question would be, how closely do they actually look at that? I'd be quite interested to see who is actually feeding that back, or who is seeing that negativity on socials. And I mean, is it going all the way up to team bosses, you know, and then their decision is kind of coming down on, like, well, okay, we need to distance ourselves from this? Are you able to shed anything on that?
Yeah, I don't know how involved Formula One are, but I think definitely teams see them. But the thing is, like, well, not every, but most drivers are like it, you know? So how can you replace the whole industry, basically? So the key point of F1 Esports and key point of sim racing, that it's raw talent, raw speed, raw skill. And if you took away everyone who was not, let's say, in the media eye in a nice way representing the brand, what can you do, you know? So it's a bit, I don't know the right saying for it, but it's a bit difficult. And I think the community have a really good point, because there's a lot of stuff to continue to improve, but also it's hard to sort of improve when we're sort of biting the hand that fed us in the first place.
So you talking about drivers being toxic? I was thinking you were more talking about the fans and the community being toxic, but you talking about F1 Esports drivers almost being toxic towards everything.
Not specifically, to be honest, but I think it's a global thing. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly, like if it's the fan or the driver, but there are some really good fans and some really good people involved in it. And there's a fantastic baseline of people. But I think even if you watch the stream or see a chat in league racing or something, it is just very hard pressed at the moment to find a positivity.
I think, yeah, and you're making a really good point as well, and it's probably worth us kind of touching on that in a little bit as well, because I know we can definitely dig deeper. I kind of want to switch it back to your journey, where I think, was it June 2018 where you mentioned about Mercedes? So I just want to fill the gap between you winning the first title to then what happened, you know, what kick-started talks with Mercedes, what kind of got that ball rolling for the next step for you?
Well, I don't actually know what kickstarted the talks with Mercedes, because my manager did it at the time.
Okay.
But basically, he said, if you win, we can go to Mercedes. So
That's simple.
Yeah, let's go. Basically. So, yeah, that's what kickstarted that. Then there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff between sort of the start of 2018 and also June 2018. Signed the contract with Mercedes June. July, then moved into a team house closer to the factory. And then that's what, let's say, fully transitioned my life from, let's say, a normal job to doing esports.
And how did your parents take that? Because obviously you mentioned you told your mum, oh well, I've given up my job, I'm gonna go do this now, and then you moved into the team house as well in July. What was that just they were like, all right, no worries, see you later, Brendon, or how did that go down?
So basically, my mum was aware that the contract was going to happen, but of course for her it's a bit like, yeah, sure, esports, yeah, whatever. So she was aware, but it was a bit of a lot of pressure to sort of be managing the situation, because the mindset I was in was F1 2018 is coming. I have a chance now. I want to capitalize it. So I want to really focus on racing, continue improving. Whereas my mum was like, well, why don't you just get a job again? Why don't you go back to a normal life? Like, you had a great time. It is what it is. Go back, So there was a lot of tension there. Then finally got the confirmation that the contract was ready in June, signed it. Then I think 1 or 2 weeks later, then moved up to just outside of Brackley, where the factory is.
Interesting. So was there a bit of a, at that point, was your mum a bit like, oh, okay, I doubted the esports side was really a thing, but now you've got your contract, fair play.
Yes.
At that point, I guess she was quite supportive, and I guess just wishing you the best.
Exactly. Once the actual paperwork was signed and the moving was happening, then I think it was a bit more easy for her.
Was that the norm at the time? Because obviously now, they're all professional esports teams. There's reasonable prize money involved, and pretty much everyone there is salaried and all this other stuff. There's a lot more money in it now. But obviously back then, as you said, the teams weren't even involved in the first season. The second season, 9 of the 10 teams got involved. So obviously there was a bit of investment there, and you were the champion and you signed for Mercedes. So you can see how that's worked nicely for you. But I can imagine a lot of the field weren't salaried, weren't signed necessarily. Like, yeah, we agree that you're going to race our team, but actually we're not really going to pay you for that. We'll give you £1,000 to race the whole season. You know what I mean? It's not full time, really. Was that the case? Were you one of the few signed people, or actually was most of the grid sort of full time at this point?
Red Bull was full time for sure. Both Toro Rosso and Red Bull. I won't say it because it's not fair on the person. I won't name him either because it's not fair on him if I talked about his contract. But I had a conversation on a few weeks ago on Event 2, and basically just talked about contracts from back then, and basically Red Bull and Toro Rosso were full time. I think Renault were not full time salary, but had the ability, if they just wanted to cover their living expenses, to be full time. So probably there was, including Mercedes, 4, maybe 5 teams that were able to be full time then.
And the rest of the guys, it was just a case of, we've got a team, we'll sign a couple of drivers, but we're not really going to pay you. Like, we're just not really spending any money on this. Was that pretty much the case, for the other teams?
I think so, but I think there was also a thing of, I think people put a lot of budget behind it, a decent amount anyway, but they didn't really understand the F1 game because it's quite a bit of a niche. So in sim racing and competitively, you've always had drivers. If you go to iRacing, you go to R Factor, what it was back in the day, or maybe you did Race Room back in the day. The top drivers in each game would always circulate anyway, and if you sign one driver, it would be fine that they drive on the other game. But the F1 game is such a niche that 2018 you saw a lot of top sim racing drivers come to the F1 game, but because it's such a niche, you need to basically spend your league racing time to be ready for F1 Esports. You can't just come from iRacing and just be good on the F1 game because it's so different. So I think teams went through a learning curve to understand what drivers are actually good on the F1 game versus just being great sim racing drivers.
And how was the transition then from being, I mean this in the nicest possible way, nerdy Brendon Leigh sweating in his bedroom on your own to win an esports title, to then being signed by Mercedes, moving to Brackley, full-time sim racer? Like that's a big change, right? How did you find that transition? Was it easy? Was it hard? Did Mercedes, give you real good media training and all these other things, allow you to handle it? Or actually was it maybe overwhelming? How was it?
I was quite lucky, actually, because I started working with a personal trainer in 2018 of January, I believe it was, called Simon Fitchett, who was also the trainer for Perez, Coulthard, and some other F1 drivers as well. So I had a really lucky system that I had that sort of as the backstop, and was able to guide me quite a bit in that situation. I think going and doing my job as driving was not that difficult, but understanding and respecting the whole big picture was the bit of the learning curve that took a bit of time, because you sort of go from, like you say, being in your bedroom, talking over Discord, to suddenly having to make eye contact with the top bosses like Toto Wolff. And you're sort of sat there like, I suddenly feel really small. Doesn't help I'm like 5'4", but yeah, so that was the toughest bit. Like, the people you interact with on the daily is what it is, you get used to it. But all of a sudden, you get an email of Toto Wolff and you're like, oh, okay, this is the real deal now.
So, moving on to the 2018 season then. So, obviously, you're signed by Mercedes, you're full-time, you've got this house, I'm going to call it the sweat house. It's a sweat house. All you do is practice. That season, assuming the wiki page is right, you were top 2 in 8 of the 10 races. You won 6 of them. And this one you did dominate. You were 50 points clear by the end of the season to Danny Beresnay in P2. So clearly that was probably, at least on paper, your best season. It was certainly your best season in terms of results. How did that come about? Was it just pure number of hours on the rig? Was it a certain way you went about it? Was it just pure talent? Why were you so dominant back then? It's really what I want to know.
I'd use an insecurity to make a fuel in that year. So I won 2017. Then I was really insecure that I couldn't do it again. So in that time, I was basically having no life other than going to the shop to get food and practicing. That was my life. Literally 5-6 days, maybe even 7 days a week, depending on the time. We had the rigs downstairs, practice, eat, go upstairs, sleep, practice, eat, keep on doing that. So that was a major factor of it. We had a really great team, a fantastic team, even a team today that would do well. And something that I would push for if I had the budget to do this again. To basically, we didn't have radio engineers back then, but we had like a driver coach called Stuart Mosley, who also is the team manager for Nielsen Racing, what have raced at Le Mans, has raced at the top prototype level, and now is doing Euro Formula. So he was also radical champion in real life. There was a lot of factors, and he was a fantastic person to basically be saying, hey, try this, do this, push that. And I think, to be honest, the setups on the F1 game, in sim racing maybe in generally, are not that important. You spend so many laps that you find the peak anyway. But we had a really strong system with Stuart, who gave us a great foundation for constant improvement. We had a good situation with Simon, who was working a bit on the training, getting us away from the sim, doing a bit of mental work as well. And the team was really strong. We had Daniel Beresnay alongside me, who, to be honest, was faster in the practice on most tracks than not. But I was able to stay a bit calmer in the session and then capitalise it that way. And then we had Harry Jacks, of course, Noble 2909, who dominated league racing back in the day. He came back, but to be honest, I think he realised he didn't really enjoy it like it used to be. So he was good because he was a third driver who knew he wanted to be a third driver, did the occasional thing with strategy work, a bit of setup work, but took away the pressure of the media for us. So at the events, he basically, when Mercedes invited corporate people or sponsors, Harry adopted the job of taking them around the tour, and then me and Daniel Beresnay could just focus on our work. We also had a fourth driver called Patrick Cruce, who is now a bit more of a content creator, and he was also really good. He was a bit off the pace in 2018, but he basically, again, did what Harry did with strategy work, setup development, and was like, I know I'm not driving, so I'm here to be as big of an asset as possible. And
so was this kind of like, was this kind of like the start of the whole development driver era, I suppose? And then also, you touched on it as well. I know these days teams are very hot on their training camps and everything before esports events, and things are quite structured and organized. I guess this is the first season where this really started getting put in place.
Exactly. It was the sort of start of that. And I was really lucky and fortunate to be able to capitalize on that situation. And we just had a great foundation, a great structure. We were also taking rigs to the event. So what we would do is we would rent an Airbnb. All teams did it, basically, because it was in London. So most of the teams, or 2018, only one team was not based in London, based in the UK, I should say, and that's Toro Rosso. And they were, of course, operating at the Red Bull factory anyway. So all the teams were based in the UK, and basically all the teams would rent an Airbnb, bring their rigs to the Airbnb. Before going in the morning, we would practice and warm up. In between, we would go back to the Airbnb, practice and warm up. So Mercedes had a fantastic structure that they put good facilities behind the scenes, and me and Brendon maximised it. I think that's the long and short of it. And
so you mentioned a lot of things there were basically sort of team centric. You had this person doing this person doing that, and yada yada. So you're biased, but was Mercedes just the best team in 2018?
That and Red Bull, because Red Bull also had a good budget, they had a good foundation. But I think in terms of being well oiled and being super efficient and actually putting the stuff necessary to win, they were the best, in my opinion. And I can honestly say and very confidently say that they were a big factor, if not the biggest factor, to the performance I was able to elevate myself to in practice. And then I was able to deliver that on the day. And it was a proper team back there.
And I think just to clarify as well for viewers and listeners, these days it's unheard of, right? For a team to carry their rigs around and take them to random locations. And I mean, the logistics and the cost involved in doing that must be significant. So I find that quite incredible that they'd literally just hire out an Airbnb, take the rigs along, give you guys the best possible facilities, almost irrespective of the cost, because they're already kind of focusing on this championship. And I don't know, I almost feel like these days that will be less of a less of a thing.
Not really, to be honest. It was quite cheap in 2018 because you already own the rig, because we had the rigs at home, and all the team's factory had the rig anyway in it for the UK bases. So how much is renting a van if you're over 25? Like, I don't know, like 50 quid a day, something like that, maybe.
Something like that.
So you rent the van. If you didn't already use a team van, what would of course be free. You rent the van, you drive it from your team base down. We was in Brackley, so to central London was like 2 hours in a van or something like that. You rent an Airbnb, what was cheaper than a hotel, because we had like 5-6 people with us anyway, for the media crew, filming crew, Stuart, Simon, team manager, blah, blah, blah. So if you put even people sharing rooms, that's more expensive than taking a decent Airbnb,
Okay.
So to be honest, the cost in 2018 was not that high. Now we race in Sweden, so the whole logistical problem is a different level. And basically, I can't even imagine how much it would cost to get a rig in Sweden, because you either have to fly it back and forth, find somewhere to store, or leave it in a hotel, But to be honest, if people are going to do it and the team have the facility and they want to put the support behind the drivers, crack on, Other people will be upset because they don't have the advantage themselves, but that's competition.
And I just want to hone in on your team, Mercedes. So you mentioned media people and everything, and there's a little bit of a crossover with the F1 team, I suppose. But how big was the whole team around you, including drivers? How many at that point in 2018 would you say were involved in esports?
On a consistent level, not including the filming crew, so not including drivers, because of course we had the 4 drivers. We had 2 people with Stuart and Simon, we also had Joff, who was basically team manager. So now that's up to 3. We had the manager for the agency, so that's 4. Then let's see, when we talked about, let's say, going into Mercedes, we had the actual project manager inside Mercedes, so that's 5. The general sort of assistant to him, so that's 6. Then when you start adding in filming crews for one day, maybe we're up to like 10 people. And that's not including the driver, of course. So you could be, on a peak day, be looking at like 14. But on a day-to-day, you probably was ending up with like 7 people.
It's so interesting hearing all this, because I was there in 2018. I went to the Gfinity Arena and I watched it in person, and it did stand out to me that Mercedes seemed to have the most people.
Yeah.
You know, you guys would come off stage and you'd have almost a team around you, almost like a huddle of people, and it was like, these guys have got like a crew, whereas some other drivers were basically completely on their own. And you know, having spoken to you now, it's obvious why. Mercedes were basically the ones that took it the most seriously, the earliest. And to me, I've got a lot of respect for Mercedes at the time, because obviously at the time they were dominating F1, and I think they were dominating F1 because they were the best team. They had the best car, but because they had their best team, led by Toto Wolff. And clearly they took the same attitude to esports. They went, well, if we're going to do esports, let's win it. Let's not just like do what the other team's doing. We'll put our name on the, on the team, but whatever, who really cares? They went, no. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it. Let's get a house. Let's get these guys involved full time. Let's pay them salaries. Let's get a team manager. Let's get a trainer. Let's get, on all this stuff. And that was, it's interesting that, George, you were talking there about how, they were spending more then than they do now. I think relative to the time they were, because most teams weren't really spending anything. So, yeah, compared to all other teams at the time, hiring an Airbnb, bringing the rigs down and stuff, that is a big deal. But obviously, compared to now, teams, from Aston Martin and Williams have got an amazing facility. I'm not sure about the other teams. They build now these permanent facilities in their base, like huge areas. Like, that's way more money than what we're talking about bringing a couple of rigs for an Airbnb. So, they definitely spend more now. But, yeah, it's just interesting how I literally noticed the size of your team back then. And I don't think anyone else really, maybe Red Bull had a few, but I just remember it standing out. Like, Mercedes are the ones taking this most seriously, and that explains the absolute domination of the 2018 season, to be honest.
Yeah, and I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2019. I'm not really following rugby, but there's a rugby Twickenham Stadium. I don't know.
Twickenham.
Is it Twickenham? I don't know the name.
Twickenham, in London.
Yeah, the Sky HQ. Anyway, so they lived there for the whole season. They rented out hotel rooms. They put rigs in the hotel rooms, and they were there for the whole time. I can't remember if that was 2018 or 2019, but they definitely did it for one of the 2 seasons. And it shows, you're right, that the teams you see taking it really uber seriously and maximizing it are teams that you just see rising to the top. And esports is so detailed and so close that you can take a driver who's, let's say, a P10 driver, and if you give them a comfortable facility for how they want to work and the team wants to work and all the team are in the same direction, you can probably take them to a top 5 driver. Drivers will always sort of raise to the top, because that will just be the cream, the cream raises to the top or something.
And obviously mentality is clearly key, right? And I really wanted to ask you this, because you mentioned it before, that you won the 2017 championship, and almost your first thought was insecure as to whether you could retain that championship. So then you go into 2018, you deliver an absolute dominant season, as Alex said. Did that kind of, has that kind of eliminated your any mentality issues that you might have had there, or like negative thoughts about yourself? What did that do to you mentally?
Oh, it made me slower, to be honest. It just did, because it took me a long time in life to realise it, because I was still practising as I always did. I was still doing the things I always did. In more senses, I was more angry than I was because I was not getting the results I wanted, but I wasn't as core driven. And I think the thing I can compare it to is, I know Alex does a lot of running as well, but I think people can relate to it, that when you're running, doing whether it's just down the street or for a situation you're purposely running for an event, you run faster, harder and better when you're mad at something. When your core is absolutely seething at something, or when you go to the gym and lift weights. When your core is seething about something, you do it better more often than not.
Alex, you're 24/7 angry, aren't you? Can you confirm?
That's why I'm a runner, mate. Got to get out somewhere, aren't I?
Yeah, bang on, mate. So that's what I describe it to. 2018, I was insecure, so that became a real driving force and a raw energy, what meant I could catch the car and snaps of oversteer because I had that thing in the brain of just pure adrenaline. Whereas when I lost that, I wasn't as sharp. What meant I could do things that were still good, especially in like rain races where you didn't need to be sharp. But that moment to be back on the power and for the rear of the car to be moving around and twitching just wasn't there anymore. And I went through, I remember very distinctly, and I won't name the companies, whatever. I remember there was a very distinct moment in my career, very, very distinct. I went to Italy for the day to try out some basically mental tools on how you can focus a bit better and everything. And I went there, and they were fantastic people and a fantastic company. But I sort of left that day, and I wasn't mad anymore, because I almost understood everything about myself and why I was mad and why I was insecure. And I remember driving Baku before I left, and driving Baku again, and I couldn't hit an apex. Because I lost that little sparkle in the mind that made me sharp how I was. So I literally had to learn to refocus. And if you watch my face when I was driving in 2018, 2017 as well, I was pure anger, pure emotion in the face. Then when you start getting through 2019, 2020, I didn't have that on my face anymore. And that was... Yeah.
That's amazing. You're literally talking about a moment in time there where it clearly switched from what sounds like absolute determination and concentration and a single goal in life. This is what I'm built for. This is everything to me. This is all I care about. To suddenly losing that motivation overnight. Can you talk a bit more about that? What does it say you did? You went to a training or something, was it?
I won't mention the company because the company is fantastic. It's not their fault. They've trained so many fantastic Formula 1 drivers. So it's not their fault, not at all. But I remember distinctly they had a training exercise that was you put on a headband, and the more calm you are, the faster, I think it was calm and focused you are, because it would measure your brain waves and you basically scan your brain for how tense you are, how focused you are, etc., etc. The better and faster the car would go around the circuit. So, in some way, that also rewired my thought process on how I thought I needed to get the performance out of myself. So before, I was complete anger and determination, but that meant the car didn't go fast because the brain waves picked up me being stressed. So, that stress now changed, and I didn't have that edge anymore because it rewired what I thought was right or wrong. And you see some days in esports where I would pick up really good result or a really good performance, and those are the days I could sort of trickle back into it. I could really have something in my life that pushed me to a point of anger that I was like, okay, time to go, and I would clutch up in a race. I would absolutely do a good race. 2022 USA came about because I was super mad and super, to be honest, worried that I didn't even pick up a podium for Ferrari in almost 2 years of being there. I joined Mercedes, left Mercedes, joined Ferrari, and I was like, now or never. It's now or never. And that generated the pace in a USA wet race where I went from P8 or P7, I can't remember exactly, on the end of first lap, to then overtaking many cars, at some point lapping, I think, half a second faster than the leaders in the rain. Of course, a lot of that was battery deployment, and then getting a podium because of it.
Just go on. I've got one more on this company. I'm afraid you're going to move on, this specific company. So I completely agree with this thing, but I'm fascinated. Obviously, this company exists for a reason.
Yeah.
So what they do must work.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It sounds like in certain situations, maybe if you're a runner, it probably is good to alleviate the mind. Or if you're a snooker player, you don't want to be stressed and tight in the mind. You want to be able to relax into it. MotoGP rider, probably the same thing. If you're tight and stressed, you're not going to be fast. Clearly that didn't work for you personally.
Yes.
Maybe it doesn't work for esports in general because you do have to be so wired and concentrated and perfect. So what else did that company do? What the thing that the training they gave you? Who would they normally give that to? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Just motorsport drivers.
So it was a motorsport thing?
Yeah, it was motorsport. And I can't reiterate enough because they are a fantastic company. The people there are lovely and I really wish them the best. It just, that and the structure I had behind the scenes at that time meant they were forcing me, not the company, but they were forcing me to adopt that process. What I didn't want, I didn't believe was right for me, but they were forcing that upon me and then putting a situation that if I didn't do what they said, then quite simply, then they were putting pressure on me to be driving or not. Because then I wasn't following the schedule, I wasn't following
But you're a two-time world champion. You're the only driver at this point that has won a world... You're the only one that's won not just a world championship, but the two that have existed. Why did they... I mean, I don't know if you know the answer, but why did they almost give you this ultimatum like, oh, you're really successful, Brendon. You just dominated a season on the circuit. But you know what? We want to change the way you think, and you got to do this, or you're not going to drive anymore.
Maybe there's some stuff it's better not to say on the internet, but I'll tell you later. But I understand it. And yeah, I understand it. And I had a lot of deep conversations with a lot of people about this situation. But yeah, the company that we use the software for, fantastic, amazing. The way it was forced upon me and also the other members of the team was not productive. But they believed that it was right. I don't believe it was. And yeah, that's it basically.
Yeah, that's incredible. So 2018, Mercedes goes from winning like almost everything, almost double the points of the team's championship, to then 2019, they sink to 8th place in the championship. They had 83 points in 2019. 2018, they had 382 points. So that drop is absolutely incredible, and I wanted to dig into more of why you think that was, but I think you've pretty much already told us. But do you believe this was the primary reason? If they didn't, I suppose we're maybe digging into here a bit more of the way the team operates, more than just blaming this one specific training you have. But it's just fascinating that you really pinpoint that one training, that one thing they forced you to do that really was a downfall. If you didn't do that training, but everything else was the same, how differently do you think? Just the next season, obviously, over a long time things change. But just 2019, for example, do you think you had performed a lot better the following season?
I also want to clarify, it wasn't Mercedes. All the teams were run by agencies back then. And I think they didn't have a full understanding of what was happening. And I was not mature enough on how to know to communicate those things at that time. So Mercedes were fantastic. And I'm also very grateful to that agency with those situations, because they also gave me my chances. And I don't hold any bad feelings, because that's life. But to go back to your point, just to make sure there is not miscommunication in the public or something. But yeah, I'm very grateful to Mercedes, and I'm also very grateful to the other agency. But I would have been a better driver, but a worse human. And I would have been a better driver because 2018, I think even the people who knew me, the other drivers, the other teams, I was very single-minded, very, to be honest, not great as a person. I wasn't fundamentally a bad person, but in terms of the will to win, there was nothing other in my mind. It was winning or nothing, and friends, whatever, didn't happen.
As soon as I saw the finger wag, mate, I knew you were a good person.
Oh, yeah. So, but yeah, it was just win. And it didn't matter if I had to dive bomb, send it, or whatever, I was winning. And that was my thing. Then, because of what happened in the 2019 training, then that put me on a whole new thought process, and I spent many years deep thinking about why I had lost it, because it wasn't clear to me at that time. And because of those deep thought processes, I understood what it was like to be on the other side of a not good result, and I understood what it was like to feel the pain of losing. And then I was like, okay, I want to win, but I also don't want to put that emotion to other people anymore. And if I win, it has to be in a good way. And it can't be in a way that is ruthless.
Have you got any regrets over that? I mean, I completely get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now you wouldn't look back and go, "I would change anything," because you wouldn't. Maybe you probably like the person you are now more than back then.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it, you kind of improve as a human, is the way you put it. But obviously, at the time, your job is still to win F1 Esports. Your job is to do as competitively as good as you can. So, have you got any regrets over that, or would you not change a thing?
Of course, I can't say regret because, like I said, I'm happy with who I am now. And who I am now, I think, sets me up better for the rest of my life. But in terms of a competitive and solely looking at results, 100%. Being honest about it. And I would have had more success as an esports driver and a driver in general as well, also in real life, if those things were more allowing me just to be who I wanted to be. And yeah, 100% basically.
That's so interesting. So okay, so we've kind of touched on the drop off then in 2019 and then the form as a result. Did that kind of just carry on through? You know, I'm not wanting to hit fast forward on your on your next, what was it, 5 years, but what, that theme just carried on each season? Did you kind of reassess at the end of a 2019 championship and say, well, okay, this isn't working, I'm going to try a different mindset? Or you were just always in that kind of same mentality and mindset of 2019?
What started 2019? To be honest, we were okay on the pace, but we were not doing slipstreaming. There was stuff said that we should be doing it, let's put it that way, but we didn't do it. And yeah, that meant that we started on the back foot, and we basically never got the slipstreaming right throughout the whole season. Apart from that, we would have probably been okay in the qualifying, and we would have probably won a few races. And of course, when you win a race, you get the momentum, and maybe it would have played out differently. But got to the end of 2019 and was very frustrated and sort of confused onto everything that happened. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff that happened behind the scenes, not with Mercedes, but of course, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but the people that employed me at the time. And yeah, it was a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And I remember quite distinctly coming back from 2019, and I think I had like 1 or 2 days off, then was instantly grinding the game again because I wanted to understand why it went wrong. And in hindsight, I should have just taken time off rather than instantly grinding again. And I would say that's what my overworking plagued me going forward, because I was trying to recover something that, to be honest, was not missing in the first place.
Okay, so then, what was it? Was it 2020 that you joined Ferrari?
21.
Was it 21? Sorry. Okay, so 2020 you were Mercedes still.
Yes.
Okay, so presumably you've got this. You're chasing the same kind of gains in 2020 and probably a similar story, I assume. So talk us through what happened from that transition to Mercedes to Ferrari. How did that come about, and why did you decide to make that change?
So it was a change born out of necessity inside my soul, to be honest. Because I was
That sounds deep.
Yeah, it was. And I won't say right now because this goes on the internet, but I could tell again privately or something. But there was a distinctive phone call where I was like, okay, I think I need something new. And yeah, sorry for people listening, but of course NDAs are in place, and I don't fancy some sending me a letter. But basically, yeah. Came to the end of the year with Mercedes, and it was a good end to the year, to be honest. We picked up a few podiums, was close to winning, and then got a message from Alessio, who was the team manager of Ferrari, then, after the season. I think the process was about 2 weeks, or something like that, between having the conversations, saying, hey, let's do this, signed a letter of intent, packed up my stuff, and went to Italy. And
wow.
I was not actually at all aware that Jarno was going to join Mercedes. I was not aware of that. That was as much of a surprise to me as it was everyone else. And yeah, that's what happened to go to Ferrari, basically.
Wow. Okay, interesting. So I think your teammate was David Tanitsa in that first year. And Alex, have you got the stats there? Remind me how you got on in 2021.
So just to run through the results so far. So first 2 seasons, he won both championships, 2017, 2018, dominated the second one. Brendon's third season, 5th place. 4th season, 6th place. He then signs for Ferrari. We're now into 2021, and you get 10th place. So actually, your first season Ferrari ended up being, championship position-wise, your worst season.
Yeah.
Is that how it felt? Or were you actually loving life, happy days? Yeah, the results aren't there, but actually I'm so much happier now.
I was really stressed in that first year. And I was happy. I really enjoyed my time in Ferrari. But I was really stressed. And stuff just wasn't clicking because I was just mad the whole time. Not mad at the team. The team were fantastic, but mad at myself. And I was just messing up good opportunities in the races. And just dive bombing, not racing completely cleanly. I think that year was the highest penalty points I got in my career over the season. And yeah, Imola comes to mind. The race before, I picked up a 3-place grid penalty. I can't remember exactly what for. It was probably for accumulated penalty warnings. I was originally starting that race P4, I think. So a good opportunity to put some stuff right and to be on the podium. Then, because of the penalty, it put me P7. And then just completely didn't keep my head cool in the race, undercutted with a crazy strategy, then was leading, and then dropped down to like P8 or something. So, yeah, that's what I mean. Just missed, through my own mistakes, missed out on opportunities, basically.
So how much of that is up to you then at this point? Obviously, it's different for every season, different for every team. But at this point, you sound like you chose to go for a big undercut and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
So it was still primarily your decision what to do in strategy. You weren't just being told, okay, maybe 1 lap now box, like maybe a little bit more like it would be now. I
mean, the thing is, what I think the biggest difference between real life and esports, in real life, the driver can't get out and say, okay, put the hards on. The esports driver has the choice in the game. So the engineer is a bit like hands are tied behind the back, because regardless of what they say, if the driver wants to go to the hards, they're going to go to the hards, and it's kind of a hard and awkward conversation because esports is a lot more about confidence rather than stats in many ways. So, yeah, basically, I take ownership of that. That the team were good. The team had good structure, good training. Because, of course, David won that race as well. So the team were good. The setup was good. But I just overstressed the situation and didn't follow the right situation behind the scene.
Did you feel any pressure as well from having a different teammate and completely different dynamic? Clearly, your teammate's doing quite well. I think did you say the team finished 10th in the constructors that year, or was that yourself? Sorry, that finished 10th.
Myself.
Right. Okay.
Ferrari finished 4th in 2021.
Yeah. So how did that play out with the team dynamic?
That was tough. The team were always good. The team were always fantastic, and I never felt any negativity, and they always were confident to re-sign me, and we always had good conversations to re-sign into 2022. So yeah, I think I underestimated the challenge of trying to be in an Italian team while being a British boy, and I could have done more to learn the language. I could have done more to integrate myself in the Italian culture. What I think I did quite well in 2022 to be a bit more Italian in that situation, just to feel a bit more at home in the team, and that helped me going forward. But yeah, 2021, not pressure from the team necessarily, but just negative pressure I put on myself.
And that's you saying you could have got more immersed in the culture. It's really interesting hearing this, because obviously a lot of viewers and listeners will just think, well, it's just esports, just get on the game and drive, whatever. But you're basically saying all of this is feeding into your confidence. So if you'd have immersed yourself and learned a bit of the language and whatever, that would have just made you naturally quicker on track, because you'd feel more at home, more confident.
Yeah, and it would have just been a bit more easy in the practice session. There maybe would have been less miscommunications. And if you watch basically anywhere, the best teams unify in a very solid and similar culture. Red Bull were the best, to be honest, in this season, and they all were adopting the same structure. They all were super focused, super precise, and super articulated in how they go about their racing. Some teams were equally or nearly as good, I should be saying. If some things went differently, they would have been equally as good. But they took a more laid-back approach and said, okay, chill out, have fun at the event, whatever. And it's all about how your personality gels in with the team. If you're a driver who likes to, let's say, chill out, have takeaway food before a race, maybe a team that's super strict and super structured isn't for you. But if you're a driver who likes to be really critical in the nutrition and a bit more single-minded in the focus, maybe another team is for you.
And so was that a big difference between Mercedes and Ferrari in that sense?
A little bit, because Mercedes, of course, we had the nutritionist, we have Simon, who was working as a fitness and mental coach. We also had Strumo, who I think wasn't on the team in 2020 because he went off and did his other things. And whereas in Ferrari, we had a bit more like the driver, you do what you need to do, we trust you. Not that Mercedes didn't, but you know what I mean. They put more resources to make sure that we were on top of it. Yeah. And Ferrari was just a little bit different. And now I compare that to Sauber and RHG, where I am at the moment, and adapting a bit of culture, because the team managers, of course, Romain Grosjean, Thibault, Samuel, Stéphane, who are all French, you know. So I had a bit more life experience to say, okay, I could understand wordings that they're going to say and understand what they mean by that. Whereas when I went to Ferrari, I didn't understand before that Ferrari are a lot more, Italians in general, a lot more straight to the point. Yeah. British people can be a bit more beating around the bush and like, oh, we don't want to hurt your feelings. Italians don't want to hurt your feelings, but they want to tell you how it is. You know, so that was a culture shock for me at first, because I was like, whoa, okay.
It's interesting. It sounds like kind of, you know, a natural evolution, right? It's the experience process. Everyone has it in any career. Yeah. You know, you start out not knowing how to communicate with your colleagues and your managers and stuff, and you learn, and especially as then you move in teams, same as like moving jobs. You then go, oh, hang on, this new company works completely differently. Especially as you had a whole new culture. It wasn't just a new company. Yeah. So at this point then, so you've gone from winning the first 2 championships, Davitinitsa wins the next one, then Yardwatmir wins the next 2 in a row. So you've now got someone else who's also a double champion. You've just moved to a new team. You've also just been beaten for the first time by a teammate, I believe, in a championship at least, in 2021. So end of 2021 season, where are you at mentally? Are you still going, right, you mentioned negative pressure before, but are you still going, right, that this is obviously not going the way I'd really like it to. 2022, I'm going to make a big change, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. Or I don't know. I mean, how are you feeling at this point?
I was feeling pretty mad. I was feeling
angry.
Pretty mad. Yeah, angry at myself, because I knew I had a better potential than I was putting on display. And I remember a really distinct moment after event 1 of 2022. I started basically waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and would go to the factory. The security guard was really confused. So I would wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to the factory, be there for like 4:30, and often would drive until like 7, 8 p.m. So all of that frustration went channeled into anger. So my routine at that point was sort of one day on, in the sense that I would one day wake up at 4:30. The next day I would go home, sleep until like 8, 9, whatever, then start training from like about 10 till like 9:30 or whatever. Next day, 4:30 again, and just kept on routinely doing that. And that led to me doing all the little situations that made the difference in USA. Because I rehearsed so many things, I went through so many details, that I was at a point that I was just driving subconsciously again. So I knew every detail before I arrived. Of course, that isn't sustainable. But for that short-term process, it made a good result.
So you were literally practicing 12 hours a day, every day. how does that compare to the amount of laps you were doing back in sort of 2017, 2018 when you first came onto the scene? It sounds like you basically no-lifed it back then. Were you actually practicing more now?
About the same. 2018 was 6 until... Well, I'd wake up at 6 and then finish around 8. But I lived at home, so it was a bit easier. But in the factory, we lived like a 10-minute walk away. So, and of course, that changes the feeling that you have to wake up and walk there, go to the canteen, and you can't nap during the day. When you're at home, you can have a quick nap and then go back to training. So I would say the same, but I had to make up for the hours that I didn't have, let's say, easy access to food or sleep or whatever during the day. So I had to get up earlier, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, okay, just because you weren't training at home effectively.
Yes.
Yeah. So then fast forward to the end of 2022, which with hindsight was your last season for Ferrari. You did improve in the championship. You went back up to 8th in the championship. You also beat all your teammates that season. I know you didn't all do every race, so it's a bit muddy, but fundamentally you ended up beating all your teammates that season and getting one podium. But obviously another big change was afoot. You then moved from Ferrari to Sauber, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know what name they go by each season, but how was that transition? How did that come about? Similar to the story you told about Mercedes to Ferrari. How did that come about, and how was it?
It was sudden. It was very sudden. This one I can't go into detail because still it's relatively fresh in a timeline. So there's stuff that I can't say and also don't want to say out of respect people. But of course there was a bit of differences happening. And then I got approached by RHE. It was I don't know, 1.5 weeks before Valentine's Day or something like this. So made a new love, no, I love Ferrari. I always have, and they're all still in my heart, and I'm still really close to the team managers and team bosses. But just because of some situations that were happening, me also moving back to the UK, and being full-time in the UK and wanting to train from home and to restabilize life a little bit, basically it just became a better decision for me to be in RHE, and that's how that situation generated. Additionally, because basically just doing a fresh start and just trying to revamp myself. And yeah, that's the core of it, basically.
And does the drive ever stop to try and win another championship? I mean, that's obviously what everyone wants to do. That's what you're all aiming for, but only one person can actually achieve that, right?
Yeah.
So is at this point, is the drive still absolute peak? Right, not great, whatever. Not with Ferrari anymore. Wasn't the best season last season, obviously, just only because you weren't winning. Now, I'm going to win next season. Is that the mentality going into every single season? I'm going to win this next one. I'm going to train harder. I'm going to do this different, that different. I'm going to win it next year.
I wouldn't ever say I was I'm going to win it, but I was always that's the goal. I never really had a mentality what was being better than anyone else. I never had that mentality. I always thought, even in 2018, 2017, I always thought I was going to lose the race until the final corner, because that's what drove me. Again, going back to the insecurity things. So basically, I never had that kind of thought process where a lot of people are oh, I'm the greatest, or oh, like that, and they build confidence from that. I was very much the opposite. But 2023, I was feeling very good going into the season, and was building a really good situation, and Thomas was faster in the qualifying practice, but I was able to get closer to him than I ever expected to. It was on a really good way, and basically then we changed the rigs at the start of the season. It took me a really long time to adapt to the new rig, because I spent all of my career sat in a Formula position, and then changing the rig position really just didn't suit me. And actually 2018 I remember very distinctly, and it wasn't the fault of the equipment because it happened before we got to the first event, but was driving, and then one day I woke up and basically halfway through the day I recognized that I couldn't feel my right toes anymore. So the toes on my foot went numb. So the foot was about 30-40% numb, and my big toe was completely numb. And that basically happened because I went and booked some really emergency appointments with the chiropractor and did a lot of chiropractor sessions before the season started. This was like now a week before the season was due to start. And long story short of it, because I spent so long sat down, compressing the bottom of my spine, but equally also with one foot always extended by pressing the throttle, and one throttle was, I don't know, like 2-3 kg, and then I was always running maximum brake force on my pedals. So if you think about it, my hip was always stretched out on one side, and then randomly getting massive impulses of muscle pressure from the other side. So my hips became out of line, and then to my body and to my nervous system, etc., then one side of my body was taller than the other. What basically meant my nerves became pinched in my right leg, and that's what caused the numbness. So it's not very that obvious from like the broadcast. I don't really know if they picked up on it, but you'll see if I was walking around, I was slightly limping in 2023, and no one knew about it. I think I told my team manager like after event 1 or something, but I kept it completely under wrap, and no one knew about it because I wanted to try and go there to fight.
How did you drive with that? That's insane.
So the first day, I was like half a second off, and then I started building a process that I remembered where the grip was, and started to change my feeling for it. And this is why in the race I was always better than qualifying, because qualifying was quite difficult. Even if you knew what was going to happen with the grip, you're still sliding around on the tyre temperature, so you don't know exactly. And because I couldn't be quick with my throttle on and off to sort of catch the car, I really struggled in the quality to maximise it. But when it rained, I could use my brain again, because you're not really thinking about or reacting with the throttle, you're predicting the grip in the rain. So I could use a muscle memory of where my foot was to predict where the grip was going to be. So in the rain, especially, I was much stronger than the dry, but equally in the race, I was stronger because I could do a calculation in my brain, remember where the grip was in practice, and then each lap basically say, okay, the tyres are more worn, so I can lower my grip expectation and manage it that way.
Was this your first physical problem? Because if you're doing 12 hours a day, basically sat in the rig for majority of that time, that's, as you say, I mean, now you say it, obviously that's going to cause issues, especially with that imbalance there. And you know, the rigs aren't necessarily designed to be comfortable, particularly not perfect comfort, not to be sat in 12 hours a day, that's for sure. So I mean, was that your first medical issue? Was that your first, medical is a bit of a stronger word, but you know what I mean? Was that your first issue you had?
In that sense, yeah. That was the first big one. I had for a few years, like my shoulders are rolled forward a little bit. So my shoulders, if you look at like my webcam, if people are seeing it, my shoulders should sit here, but they sit basically here because I'm sat there driving like that for so long. I did see a chiropractor about that in 2019, but it was just very difficult to get them back into position. And yeah, so that was kind of not really a problem, just sort of a body adjustment to the stress that it was under. But basically losing the feeling in the right foot was the first major one.
And to be clear,
with that.
This started because of the rig change and the different position.
No, it happened before the rig. It was just a ticking time thing, you know. And when the chiropractor explained it to me, it was always going to happen for the amount that I was doing. In many ways, it was a miracle that it didn't happen before then. I think what didn't help it is I was really big into running during 21, 22, and 23. Then as I got closer to the season preparations, I stopped running. And then basically the combination of stopping running and driving so much in one position, I think basically just sent like a override or over whatever the word is to the body, and it was just in a place that just overstressed it.
Interesting. So we now got to the point where we're in this sort of 2023 season. You've just signed for Sauber, but I think it'd be remiss of us not to talk about the transition between Gfinity and I can't remember who the new company was,
ESL.
But the ESL completely changing, right? And you know, there was lots and lots of issues behind the scenes. The 2023 season started with no fanfare whatsoever. There was no announcement externally.
Yes.
It was literally, hey, F1 Esports here, and it's live right now.
Yeah.
Qualifying is on right now. It literally, I think the stream actually technically started before the announcement. It was that immediate. There was zero gap. So obviously externally, that's strange. We then also had, then after that, about an extra, I don't know what it was, a 2-month gap or something between, maybe even longer than that, between event 1 and event 2. Obviously, externally, it seems like carnage, but they never really say much. I appreciate there's certain things you can't say either. Yeah. But as a driver and internally, how was that for you? Was that really difficult to manage? Were you really even involved in it? Did it matter? Just talk us through it.
Wasn't involved in it, and I don't really think any of the drivers actually knew what was happening, to be honest. We sort of heard, some drivers heard from the team managers, some team managers didn't want to tell the drivers, they wanted the drivers to stay focused. So from what I remember about it, there wasn't really a distinctive answer from the drivers on exactly what was happening. I think the team managers knew, I think Formula 1 knew, but I will go back and say I think everyone was genuinely trying their best to get the show on the road, but there was actually like fundamental, deep-rooted problems within certain areas that I can't say, that they were trying the hardest to fix, but a tight timeline and also the reintroduction to LAN, because that was the first time we went back to LAN since COVID happened in 2019, meant that a lot of stuff was really difficult to get in place. So Formula 1, ESL, and I think the teams did a fantastic job, but I think a lot of stuff happened too quickly and too soon, and it sort of became difficult for everything to align correctly.
I mean, I'm not signing anybody, so I can say a bit more, but it was money is what it was. It was a case of money. The new season was in Sweden, remote place. F1, from what I understand, basically said they would pay for all the team's expenses to get out there, and then they at the last minute went, oh no, we're basically not going to do that, and just money. It's of course, it's always money, especially with F1. So as far as I gather, that's what it is. Brendan's obviously not going to be able to confirm or deny that.
I think to be fair, I can add a little bit to that, because I was out with Brendon in Sweden for round 1 of that season, and again, there's only so much that can be disclosed, but it was between teams and Formula 1. It wasn't the drivers and down at that level. So very, very much was more of at a like contractual level than it was, to do with anything else. So messy for sure. But thankfully, it looks like we're kind of in slightly a better situation now. And of course, for viewers and listeners of the last podcast that had to put up my janky mic in a hotel room in Sweden, I'm now back from Sweden as well. Brendon, of course, out in Sweden last week for the final event, also announcing the big retirement. It's finally out there. I know you've kind of got some things in the works, but I guess talk us through what kind of led you up to that retirement announcement. What was you must have known about that for a short while, and how did you, number one, deal with that driving wise? Because you must have known clearly, before you were doing the races. How did that affect your mindset?
I did know about it for a short while. I think, if I remember my timelines correctly, it was about November. I was sort of like, okay, I think this is right. I think it's time to step away.
So November, sorry, that's before
2024. So before the season.
Before the season, before event 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a long way before event 1, because event 1 was January, and this was November. And it was something that I thought was naturally coming anyway. It was a process inside of the heart that I could feel like I could drain more energy for another 1-2 years, but I wouldn't be happy and I would just be collecting a paycheck, basically. And I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to just collect paychecks. So I told the team in November, or something around there anyway, can't remember the exact timing. Was not sure when to announce it, in all honesty. I wasn't sure to announce it before the season, in the middle of the season, or after the season, whatever. And to be honest, it was just weighing so much on my shoulders. I said to the team, okay, I need to announce it on the event 1 and before the season even starts. And that's when it came about, basically.
Okay, interesting. And yeah, so you kind of at that point when it's announced, because sorry, remind me what was the point you announced it? Was it in the run up to event 2? I don't think it was before
Event 1. So it was the day before event 1.
Okay, so
no, the day before media day. Sorry, so 2 days before the first race.
Okay, so then moving forward from then, your announcement is public. Everyone knows. It's no surprise anymore, and we're kind of building up to that as well. How are you approaching each race? Or, especially going into the final event, for example, your teammate is in the championship hunt. How are you approaching that?
Trying to deal with it as best I can, to be honest. Yeah, it was a situation that some stuff was updated in the physics of the game around November time. That I would also say had an influence actually on my decision. Because on the normal build, the public build, with everything people, if you don't know, we have an esports build and a public build. It's knowledge that's public, so I don't have to hide it. That has different handling characteristic. I like a car that's very settled on the rear, very stable on the rear, and I'll push understeer throughout the corner, and that's how I get lap time out of it. The update basically removed a bit of stability from the rear of the car, especially in the middle of the corner. So meant that to drive it quickly, you had to do the steering wheel flick, what you might have seen. I fundamentally can't do it because the same thing that happens with the leg. Also, because I think because of my shoulder being rolled forward, if I move my arm too quickly in a janky motion, it makes my arm go numb and gives me pins and needles down my arm.
Wow.
So fundamentally, I couldn't do it. So that basically nullified me before the season even started, and I went from being very competitive on the pace to suddenly 2 tenths off, 3 tenths off in quali. So that didn't help. That didn't help my decision. I can't remember the rest of the question.
Yeah, so obviously going into like the final event where your teammates, bit very like I think I don't have the stats to back this up, but I'm pretty confident in saying that it was the closest championship in history going into that final event. So clearly, as a teammate to someone in the running for the championship, you've got a big part to play. So how do you what mindset do you enter going into that, given that you're going to retire, this is your last dance? Does it make you like more motivated almost to kind of get a result because this is it for you? This is like your last races.
I don't think it made me more motivated, to be honest. We also had Tico in the team, who deserved the chance to be racing to show what he could possibly do for next year. And in terms of going back to the point with Thomas, etc., fighting for the championship, my approach was I just stood back, to be honest. I tried to remember what it would be like for me in that time, and I sort of stood back, focused to basically doing a lot of training by myself. Because I just wanted Thomas and his engineer and Tico to focus and work together because they're a strong trio together. They're all from Netherlands, so they have a good relationship. They can all speak Dutch, whereas if I'm just in the lobby or in the Discord server being like, oh, what did you say? What's going on? It doesn't help anyone. Yeah. So I stood back from that situation, basically just did a lot of the training by myself and just focused on my own emotion, going through the processes and just letting it be, to be honest.
So how much of it is a team game then? Because we see, there is some money these days for the driver's side, but there's still the lion's share of the prize money, at least, is from the team's championship. And we've seen lots of people get benched effectively. That's probably too harsh a word. I'm sure it's agreed, but that's the point. Is someone's agreeing to step down and not race. I mean, it happened to Danny Beresne multiple times this season, despite him being somewhat in contention at the front there, definitely doing all right in the first half of the season. So, are you just team result? Is that all you really care about, or because in F1 it seems to be more about the drivers' championship than teams' championship, despite F1 being more fundamentally a team sport. There's 1,000 people operating an F1 team. There's one driver. Of course, you're going to naturally be more a team player in that case. But is it really more about the team? I guess it varies team to team, driver to driver, does it?
I think it does. To be honest, esports are so niche that I think the driver will make that decision anyway if they want to be on the team or the drivers' championship. I think Mercedes was fantastic actually this year. They played it really well. They had an unfortunate final event, but apart from that, they played the free driver role fantastic. I think for Kick and Sauber, there was no secret that it was on for the Drivers' Championship, and Thomas was going for the Drivers' Championship. Red Bull, I don't really know, actually, how they were viewing it. I think Jarno, for sure, was going for the Drivers, and I think because Freddie had the unfortunate situation event 1 where he got taken out quite a lot and he was starting on the back foot, then he started naturally playing the team game. But to summarise the answer, I should say, I think basically all drivers who think they can have a chance of winning the Drivers go for the Drivers. You get more prize money from the Drivers as a, let's say, selfish decision anyway. And yeah, it's a bit of a quarter trophy at the end of the day.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate we could kind of go on, and I could definitely ask 100 more questions for you on all of these developments so far. You've obviously now announced your retirement. What's next for Brendon Leigh?
I can't tell you the answer I said in person. I'll tell you later, Alex. So I just content, presenting, driver development, coaching, mentoring. That's what I want to be doing. I really want to do something with the industry, and specifically F1, because that's my skill set, that I can give people the lessons, or at least offer people the lessons that I wish I had when I was growing up. When I was growing up, there was a channel, and still is a channel, called Driver 61. Scott Mansell, I believe, is his name, and he's transitioned to sort of a more content creator, whereas back in the day he was doing the best, the literal best examples on how to drive. I was watching them for hours a day, researching how weight transfer worked, how setups worked, and he's basically my motivation for a lot of the videos I do, about trying to teach people in a free and easy to access way that maybe someone else can learn a skill set to become champion. Alex, you got a question though?
No, carry on.
Okay.
Carry on.
Sorry.
I've got, as you said, I've got a million questions,
okay.
but I'm letting you speak.
Yeah, that became my motivation. So my bread and butter, basically going forward, will be offering a lot of tutorials on sim racing, specifically F1. Doing, let's say, a bit more fun content. Let's say career mode. Hopefully one day to be in creator series. That would be a good fun. Maybe doing 2-player career mode, and yeah, a bit more fun videos alongside the serious videos with tutorials. I still want to do some competitive racing, but more specifically stuff that doesn't take 6 or 7 months a year to do. I still love driving, I still love competing. There's a DTM championship that started before esports finished, so I can't do it, but it seems like a more compact schedule. And I think
so we're not talking F1 League racing, we're talking like other...
That F1 League racing is, to be honest, for people training for F1 Esports or trying to get to F1 Esports. Yeah. I think for my side, I think it wouldn't be respectful of me. I think I could go into that space, especially with WOR. I think I could be there, but what am I doing? I'm taking a seat from someone who can maybe prove themselves. And I wouldn't really be in contention to win because I wouldn't be practicing that much, and I would just be there to have a bit of a laugh and make a YouTube video.
I mean, the same thing for Creator Series, mate. You want a seat in there, you'd be taking Alex's seat, depriving him of his role in esports.
Well, I could take out Ben on purpose at least.
yeah, you're in. You're signed. That's it. Yeah, that's fair. I guess be there, done that to some extent for you. I don't necessarily agree that league racing is only for trying to get to esports. I think I've. Yeah. That sort of level potentially a bit more so. But I do completely get what you're saying. But you got to join the dark side, mate. It's about 5 minutes of practice before jumping straight into an iRacing race.
That's what I want to do.
That's the dream.
I saw there's a league. I think made by Adam, who has like realistic performance on the car. I love that idea. I want to do that. That would be a good laugh.
We did that with 4-player career actually on F1 24, and it is good fun. It's a really good way to kind of balance the field a bit more. But yeah, we're waffling for an hour and a half, but there's 2 questions that are burning. Even though we've just done that beautiful round out of, but what next? Okay, then that's done. No, I'm going back. I've got 2 more questions, and then that's it from me. A little while ago, you mentioned about Thomas Ronhaar.
Yeah,
and you said, I think you said something along the lines of. I don't think I should be beating him, or you were. I think you said something like you were surprised you were able to match him, or something like that. Why is that?
because to be honest, in terms of raw pace and raw ability to drive a car or esports car quickly, he's the fastest driver I've seen and came across. And it's something that is fantastic to watch. Of course, he made a lot of mistakes in the final race, and I think he acknowledges that. And I can be honest about that as well. But in terms of raw pace and just raw ability to drive a car quickly, he took like 3 poles out of 4. The only time he wasn't on pole was P2 in Qatar, qualified P3.
Yeah, mad. His qualifying was unreal all season.
And going against that as someone who is a bit older, my qualifying isn't my strongest trait. I was like, okay, game on. Let's see what I can do, you know? And if I can get within 10th of him every qualifying, probably we're going to be P5, and then I can fight for the win from there, you know? So that's why I was like, I expected myself to beat him. I expected myself to be there with him, but that was the big picture. In terms of actually doing it in qualifying and being good with the PBs, I was really proud of actually being able to step up in that way.
So are you able to learn much from him then? Because it sounds, you know, although you're the experienced one, you're the champion here, but it sounds like you're saying that he's just basically, and you know, the stats prove it this season. He is just at the fastest. He's the best at driving the game. Clearly, he's got some other things to work on to be able to win a championship. So were you able to kind of copy him a bit, look at his data and be like, so he's doing that? You know, you mentioned the flick there. Obviously, that's something you were physically unable to do, which is fascinating. But outside of that, were you able to learn from him, or really is it just a case of you just can't do what you almost like Marc Marquez style? You see his data, like, I don't know how he does that, and I can't do that.
I learn it, to be honest. And now, actually, I've taken the weight off my shoulders. Even on iRacing, I'm probably faster than I was 2 weeks ago. Because now I'm actually enjoying driving again. And basically, I was so stressed when driving, I was relying on core instincts to deliver the result. And the thing that Thomas is fantastic about, I won't tell too much detail because it's not fair for me to say on his behalf. You know, his little advantages, it's not fair for me to say on his behalf, you know. But he's fantastic at just throttle management. Well, not just throttle management, but he's fantastic at throttle management. And he has a way of delivering the car out of the apex. And that's the thing that really stands out to me. And if you watch his data, sometimes he leaves his overlays open on iRacing, and you'll see his ability to perfectly smooth the throttle up. And I think that is one, if not his best trait, that just allows him to get back on the power, balance the car, put the weight transfer to the rear tyres, prepare the car, start accelerating out of the apex in a most controlled...
And it makes so much sense you saying that, because you know, back when all those silly allegations were flying about in F1 22, what was that game? Massively important on traction. And that is clearly why he was so unbelievably fast. Was it's just I have noticed the same thing watching those brake and throttle traces, as you said, and it's quite incredible, really, because you think I a mere mortal naturally think that all these esports aliens, they're perfect at all this throttle and brake management and everything, but clearly Thomas is just that just tiny bit more refined, which gives him that extra, say, 10th over a lap.
And I can say this because it's on stream anyway. I've never spoken to him about this, so I think it's true anyway. He plays a game with himself where he tries to hit a certain brake pressure, and he does it on iRacing, but he also does it on F1, but F1's less because it's a more defined brake shape. But he drives a lot of GT car on iRacing. And if you see him go down the pit lane, realise he's put a wrong setting on or something, goes back into the pit in iRacing, all the time that he's coming from hitting the brake to stopping, he holds exactly the same brake pressure. All the time. And...
So he tries to have like a flat line on the telemetry.
Exactly. And for a GT car, that's perfect because it's limited by ABS. So I don't know he does this, but I'm assuming, because I've never spoken to him directly about it. But he trains the GT car a lot, has that flat line on the telemetry, and just beautifully manages what his brain thinks 20% is, and actually what 20% is. And that also reflects within his telemetry on F1, what of course I'm not going to talk about because that'd be wrong of me to share his stuff in that way, what isn't public. But he just has a really beautiful feeling for the car. You know, that's his raw thing of just squeezing the power that little bit more, just being on the edge of the adhesion of the traction and just gliding out of the corner. That's where he's at, you know.
Well,
interesting.
Yeah.
I've got one more topic, and then unless GB's not got anything else, then I'm going to stop there because we have already been going for over an hour and a half, and I could keep going. But I think again, it'd be remiss of us not to talk about the, I guess, sort of stewarding of F1 Esports, the rules of F1 Esports, F1 Sim Racing, whatever you want to call it, because they've definitely been brought to the fore, particularly in the final race. We saw Thomas Ronhaar getting penalties and stuff for the driving and lots of accusations. There was, I think quite surprisingly to me, actually, Marcel Kiefer, who's been fantastic on the presenting team. But after the race, he tweeted that he thinks potentially Thomas Ronhaar could be or should be disqualified from the whole championship for how he drove in Abu Dhabi, which to me is utterly unhinged.
Yeah.
But just more broadly, I just think I want to talk a bit about the rules and the stewarding of F1 Esports, because for me it's so interesting seeing people get lots of penalties, and I know they're appealed, for dive bombs. And for me, dive bomb is a hard thing to define, but what I saw Thomas doing in Qatar, which again, they were, to me, the ones that were appealed were successfully appealed, and that was in the end the right decision. But the fact that they were even penalised in the first place, a dive bomb, which to me just looked like an aggressive overtake. He was ahead at the apex, he left the room on the exit. Great move. Like, the other guy turned in is what happened. That's why there was contact. They left no room. I don't love seeing that penalised. We also saw it from, I think it was Ismail Fassi in the turn one of Zandvoort against Berman, I think. Stuck behind him, could not get past him, really frustrated. So he goes for a huge move, doesn't get it stopped, almost goes in the gravel. Berman comes through anyway. There was no contact. Like that is what we want to see in F1 Esports. That is what we want to see, and he was punished for it, which is. You can see my opinion coming through. To me, that's insane.
You should have heard his opinion.
What do you think of all that? What do you think of that? What are you able to say? Like, just talk us through what I just waffled about.
So, I understand the steward's perspective, because the thing is, you don't get damage from the game for doing that. So you have to control it on a human level rather than in real life. You can't get away with that all the time because you're just going to get damaged, right? And your race is over. So it's a bit of like half of one, dozen of the other, whatever that saying is. I can't remember exactly.
Close enough.
Close enough. Lovely. So that the
six of one, half a dozen of those is the actual saying. It was close enough though.
So thank you. I'll remember it for next time. And basically, the stewards have a situation that you don't get penalised for making contact in the game. The only damage you get realistically is front wing damage. What if you hit someone with your tyre? Doesn't happen anyway. So we all know that, and if you watch esports drivers, they put the tyre in first, because they know if they hit with the wing, they get damage. If they hit with the tyre, nothing happens. So the stewards have their hands tied behind their back, that they're trying to stop drivers thinking they can do that. And David Greco said it, to be honest, as well, that if you put simulation damage on, sure, some people are going to lose a championship because of someone else doing silly manoeuvres. That's going to happen, and I think that's part of the, I can't call it a sport, because it's not a sport, but it's part of the loose quotation of a sport, that other people can affect you in a negative way. And I think the compromise of having looser stewarding, let's say, like it would be in real life, because the stewarding is a bit more in real life from what I can see. If you both get damage, the person who caused it is penalised more, but if someone goes for a move, spins, and the other car who was not at fault doesn't get anything, they're kind of like, well, is what it is, That's kind of what I see in real life now. And I feel like putting sim damage in esports would cause amazing TikTok clips for the first event. But, it would cause chaos in the first event. But drivers would learn that they can't just put the car in anymore. Whereas at the moment, every driver knows that they can just put the car in, they won't get damage. Worse, they're going to get a 1 second penalty, and hey ho, off you go.
I think I was going to, just to build on Alex's question, because there's a very good point on sim damage and potentially altering that. I was thinking there should almost be like an adaptive stewarding system. I'm going to use Brazil as an example.
Yeah.
Thomas got, I think, 3 penalties, all of 1 second each in that race.
Yes.
Didn't affect his finishing position because his 3-second track limit penalty was removed.
Yes.
So that right there to me is an example of, well, clearly a wet race at Brazil, you're not going to have 3-4 tenth gaps necessarily.
Yes.
It's clearly going to be bigger gaps naturally in the wet. So at this point, the 1 second penalty is very lenient. You know, where before it was a 5 second penalty before, which was ridiculous in the dry races because then that's big points to nothing. So I feel like they're almost, I don't know if you agree, there needs to be more of like an adaptive system that we always say that stewards make decisions based on the action, not the consequence. But I feel like this is maybe where esports should be slightly different, where it should be taking into consideration the race circumstances, given how different it is to real life. I don't know if you agree.
To be honest, it happens in real life as well. Maybe even more. I can't say more in real life, but it happens in real life as well. That someone will send it up the inside, punt someone off wide, push them onto the gravel or the grass, knowing that they have better tyres, disappear by 5 seconds, and keep the track position anyway. So it happens in real life. I do agree that there should be a way to combat it, but one of the worst things in sport, in my opinion, is the ability for penalties to not be consistent. Even if they shouldn't be consistent in some ways, I think it adds unnecessary tension to a decision. For example, if for, let's say, Abu Dhabi and the championship finale any year, and last lap, you send it up the inside for the championship, not on your championship rival, let's say hypothetically, you get the move done, and you're able to pull away 1 second in the rest of the lap because the rest of the cars start fighting. Should you be penalised more because of that situation versus someone that did exactly the same thing in the round 2 of the championship? Probably not. And it's the same thing that I say about track limits. Because you get 3 warnings before you get a penalty, right? And some drivers use the warning strategically. Some drivers use it because they made a mistake. And I'll be honest, I always use the warning strategically. I would save them, then if I know that I'm on the limit of a DRS, I would just go wide on a corner, gain a tenth, be in the DRS. And it's the same thing as penalties, right? Should I be penalised more because I did a corner cut warning in a strategical way versus someone else who did it a mistake but didn't get the advantage that I got? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
in that regard, I think the game's the game, right? Like, if you're able to keep it so clean that you can reserve those warnings, then you should. Maybe not you should, but like the game's the game. You know, everyone gets those warnings. If you had to use them because you're not consistent enough, then you miss out on that opportunity. So you're still being punished by going off track accidentally. Because you then miss the opportunity to be able to use them later. But yeah, I don't know, just go back to the dive bomber stuff. I definitely get what you're saying in that because basically the collision system, the damage system in the game is not up to scratch of what it would be in real life, whereby if you go for a dodgy centers contact, you're probably going to get damaged, you're probably going to get spun, so you don't go for them. And also, you know, it's self-policing largely. And that doesn't exist, so they need to kind of step in. And it makes some sense to me, but I just think they could also detract from the show. Like, honestly, the Netherlands one is the perfect example. Like that, there was no contact. How in the world was that ever a penalty? It's absolutely insane. I actually think, as I said, in the end, I think the stewards got it right in Qatar. I do think Ronhaar's move on, was it Longuet for the lead? I do think that one was... He had to try it, right? He was trying to go for the championship. I don't blame him for going for it in the slightest, but I do think that one was too much. There are others, though, were completely fine. I'm not actually 100% what he got in the end in Abu Dhabi, because obviously he ended up making just too many mistakes anyway. None of it really mattered. But I actually think, Brendon, what you were saying, I think it makes... I agree. I don't think the penalties need to be consistent with each other necessarily. It should be results-based. As you said, if you've just gone for a dive bomb, but actually that person, although exact same as another incident, has had a spin from it or something, I do think you should get a harsher penalty than if it was just a slight bit of contact and everyone got on with it. I do think penalties, to some extent, should correct the wrong, but they should also be relative to how badly you did wrong. Like, because if they spun just because their tyres were dead anyway, you know what I mean? They're like, well, okay, it was a bit of a dodgy move, but like whatever sort of thing. So I don't know. I just think they get it wrong at the moment. I just think I completely accept what you're saying. It's a really interesting point of view, but I just think they're just a bit too harsh right now. We want to see driving like Ronhaar's in Brazil. We want to see driving like Ronhaar's in Qatar. I meant Qatar. We want to see driving like Fassi's in Netherlands. We don't want to see it like Abu Dhabi. There definitely was, like, particularly move on Otmir. It was desperation. I think again though, there's been a lot of negativity about that, like really harsh words, but that's the toxic community that you touched on earlier. I think there was never any malicious intent there. People literally were acting like he tried to take him out on purpose, which, like, no way, because he had to win the race anyway, which was never going to happen. So if he takes him out, he's still champion. It would have done nothing. So he's not trying to take him out. He's just got desperate at the end of the day. He got desperate, he got impatient, he saw the championship slipping away, he went for a big move, it didn't pay off, and that's it. There is no more to the story than that. So anyway, I don't know. I'm waffling now, GB. Have you got any thoughts on the penalty stuff?
No, and to be fair, on the Thomas thing on Abu Dhabi, I couldn't say that any better. I completely agree. I was getting really annoyed reading all the silly fanboy comments, let's be honest, of just weird takes and severe punishments that should be handed out. It's like, come on, bro's entire year of practice has come down to this final race. He's got a broken wing. He has to go for it, because if he doesn't win the race, he doesn't win the title. Obviously he's going to go for it. I mean, whether it's right or wrong, it's obvious why it happened. So anyway, it's pretty straightforward. I think this is probably the longest podcast we've done. It
might be, yeah.
This is insane. I've got one question, Brendon, but don't worry, this is going to be a really short answer. So
now 1 hour question, let's go for it. 2 hour 45 podcast, why not?
Excluding every teammate that you've worked with so far, if you were back on the circuit, if you had to be in another season of F1 sim racing, which teammate would you pick from one that you haven't already driven with?
That's a great question. Jarno or Lucas? I lived with Lucas in 2020, and we were really good friends off the track. And Jarno, because he's the most successful driver, so probably he's the person I can learn the most from.
5 world championships between you both, not bad.
Oh yeah, there's the clickbait coming in. That'd be lovely. Imagine the press release. That'd be fantastic. But yeah, and to be honest, I have a lot of respect for Jarno. I'll keep it condensed so we don't go over like a long time in the podcast, but I have a lot of respect for Jarno because he, of course, won in 2020, 21 as well. 22, 23 were not ideal for him. And then to go to a different team, he removed a lot of himself from YouTube. He didn't upload a video on YouTube for like a month and a half, 2 months. So basically only uploaded videos he had backlogged before the season anyway. Put all of his eggs in the basket to go win the championship. Won the most races out of anyone in the season. Turned it around and became a 3-time champ. And that, to be honest, respect. And for that is, to be honest, really cool, I think.
Fair play, mate. That's it's very, very nice words. And to be fair, it can't be understated because a lot of people will look at Jarno and think, incredible esports driver. He's not just that; he is effectively also kind of a content creator with how insane his schedule is with uploads and stuff, as you said. So to remove that, I know as a content creator, Alex will appreciate that as well. Like to completely delete that side and focus on the driving to get this result is pretty damn impressive.
It's so interesting as well, isn't it? The difference between like Jarno and Jarno Otmir and Thomas Ronhaar. Thomas Ronhaar is like probably the fastest in F1 esports right now, qualifying unbelievable, but just not quite there in the race. Racecraft not quite there, can't quite keep his head. Whereas Jarno's the exact opposite of that. Regularly got knocked out in Q2, couldn't qualify well, yet somehow in that ridiculously tight field was able to come through quite regularly and improve his speed. I mean, he didn't have a single race in the whole 2025 season without a point. Like every single race he scored at least 1 point, and as you said, 3 wins, an extra 2 podiums as well. Actually, that's a lie. Bahrain, it looks like he didn't score a point. He was P11 there. So, but
he let the team. He let everyone down.
He did. He's bottled it. That's it. He's washed. He's done for.
But, right then, awesome. Well, Brendon, thank you so much for turning up to this one and having us waffle at you for an hour and nearly 50 minutes. Jesus, that's a long time.
Yeah, new record.
Well, look, you're a content creator now, and you've got other things coming as well. So I'm sure we'll see plenty of you in the space as well. And hopefully you've enjoyed being on. Hopefully for our viewers and listeners, you've enjoyed this episode as well. Something a little bit different, of course. In the break week, we have got the Japanese Grand Prix coming up this weekend. I will ask you boys very quickly: are you going to be watching that live? Are you going to be waking up for that early morning?
What time?
Absolutely not. No.
Is it like 4 a.m.? If so, big time, yes.
Is it? I think it's a bit. I think like 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Oh, no, that's a wake-up job. That's not an all-nighter.
Okay, all right. Well, Brendon might be waking up early. We'll see. But no, thank you so much again, Brendon, for coming along. Thank you to everyone watching and listening, whatever platform you're on. A reminder, as always, we're on all the popular music, all the popular audio platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, and as well as YouTube as well. Like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this one, and we'll catch you in the next episode.